And a good Friday, football Friday morning here on Birds 365. You got your Mac guys, John McMullen and Jody McDonald. And John, it seems like we're talking about the newest Eagle on a day in, day out basis here, or at least since they lost their first game of the year against the Commanders on Monday. A very familiar name to even the most casual of Birds fans.
Big name, baby. Big name, Jody.
And Ndamukong Suh joins the flock. Was fairly surprised that Linval Joseph was an addition earlier in the week, but after the way the Commanders ran the football, I guess I shouldn't have been. But once you add Joseph, well, then, of course, they're not going to be talking to Ndamukong Suh. They got more than enough defensive tackles, even though some of them aren't healthy yet. Here we are, and Ndamukong Suh, the newest Philadelphia Eagle. What does this say about the Eagles' defensive tackle position?
Well, it says a number of things. I think most notably it says, the Eagles are all in. I mean, they realize the championship window's open and they're going for it. So that's the positive. It indicates that they're not as high on certain players as maybe we thought. That's part of it as well. And maybe the injuries are a little bit more serious than expected. I'll throw that in the mix as well, because, again, you talk about everyone assumed high ankle sprain. Jordan Davis will be back after 4 games. Well, that's not necessarily the case. I mean, high ankle sprains are, sometimes you have to have surgery for those things. So maybe it's a little bit more serious than we expected. And Marlon Tuipulotu, I don't know. The Eagles continue to say they love him as a player. It was kind of a murky injury. Nobody really knows what happened yet. But it tells me, look, they're not confident when Marlon's out there, nor should they be. Marvin Wilson from the practice, and Milton Williams as well. They're not confident when those players are out there. The Milton Williams one surprises me a little bit. But you got to be honest. I mean, it's evident that they don't think he's ready to perform at the level they want for the snaps they need him for right now, and that's why the Joseph signing makes sense to me, because they need the nose tackle. We talked about it a lot, to run what they want to run, the real nose tackle, and that's what he is. And we'll see how much he's got left in the tank. Suh surprises me a little bit, and that's the one. They've been talking to him for a while. That wasn't an overreaction to one game. They've been talking to him for a while. They have so many guys who are most comfortable playing 3 technique. I mean, Fletcher, Javon, Milton, and now Ndamukong Suh. And obviously they have to play other positions and other techniques. I don't know. A little bit strange to me, the Suh one. But hey, they're going all in. There's nobody who can deny that.
You can't question their commitment to try and win a championship this year. You hope that that's the case every year, but there are degrees to it. And certainly they have pushed all their chips into the middle of the table with their signings over the last couple of days, bringing guys in that haven't been playing, that have been Pro Bowl level players. And Ndamukong Suh was, at certain years, you might even say, thought to be the best defensive tackle in the National Football League.
Remember the all-decade team in the 2010s. I mean, this was a big-time player.
Agreed.
Big-time player.
And he certainly contributed when Tampa won the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. The last year, not as much.
Gave the Eagles fits in the playoffs, Jody. Had a big game.
Did. Played very well against the Eagles in the postseason. Here's the question I have about the guys that will be losing snaps when these guys get up to speed, which, by the way, Linval Joseph, there for practice yesterday. He participated, which you can't say about all the Eagles, and we'll get to their injured list for a walkthrough in just a second. But I got a chance to at least see him. Did he look like a guy who's going to be ready to actually
he's ready
hop on the roster and play?
He's ready to go. He's going to play. I don't know if Suh's going to play because he got here so late, and they barely practice on Friday. He'll be there today. He was not there yesterday. Linval's 335, he told me. and he looks well for 335. I mean, he's not he's a lot like Jordan Davis when you say he's 340, but he doesn't look 340. Just a big man. Jonathan Gannon knows him from their time together in Minnesota when he was a really dominant player. Jason Kelsey speaks so highly of him, has for years, played him twice a year when he's with the Giants, a bunch with Minnesota, called him the strongest player he's ever played against. And that was his reputation around the NFL in this prime, strongest player in the league. He's going to play, and he's going to play right away. It's interesting. I was trying to come up with this, and the best I can come up analogy wise is the NBA buyout market, which sort of took off, 10, 15 years ago. It's been for a while. But the difference is those guys have been playing. But you have these veteran players, Linval and Ndamukong Suh, who, as I said yesterday on the show, made a boatload of money. And they don't want to play for the veteran minimum. And they're 34, they're 35. I mean, you know how this league, Jody, looks at over 30 players. They're like, we got to move on. We got to get younger. We got to do this.
Eagles usually handle their business in that way. They've kind of put that on the back shelf this week.
Because now they're contenders. So I think, the Eagles pride themselves on being on the forefront of things, of being ahead of the curve. And I think you're going to see this more and more with aging players. Just biding their time because there's 17 games. Everybody makes a big deal about that. They don't want to get banged up. They're going to survey the situation. They're going to pick the contender, and they're going to play the second half of the season. I think this is going to start being a trend. Now, Suh got, I'm told, more than the veteran minimum. We'll see how much more. So these guys don't want to play for that. They don't want to go through the grind. They've been through that. And then if you could pick and choose a contender and go get a ring, I think this is going to start being the thing. We'll see. And I think the Eagles pride themselves on being at the forefront of things like that. But they don't want to pay older players in this league. And that, as I said, Suh specifically, he dominated the Eagles in the playoffs last year. I mean, nobody can tell me he can't play. That's the best offensive line in football, the Eagles. And he dominated them. Nobody can tell me he can't play, but he's 35. Nobody wants to pay a guy who's 35. So it's this weird sort of disconnect. But I think he could still play. I think Linval can still play. Played well with the Chargers last year. But we'll see. I mean, we'll see.
Is it just a coincidence that we're talking about two defensive tackles that both chose the Eagles as the team to join with a Super Bowl possibility? Wouldn't we have seen other guys if this is your new reality theory in the NFL? Aren't there some other veteran guys that are sitting around waiting to have an opening on a team?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I thought about was Gronk, because they need a tight end more than they need a defensive tackle. Maybe they can convince him to come out of retirement, go after another ring. And then there's the Jared Cooks of the world, a little bit lesser. I'm surprised they haven't gone out and got a tight end, but today's another day. Maybe they do, Jody. Maybe they do. But I said the Eagles, I said from this point forward, I think the Eagles might be creating a new trend, going out and getting these guys. If you're a contender, look, if they're not a contender, you're not going and bringing in a 35-year-old guy, a 34-year-old guy. You got to be a significant contender. And then you go, all right, we got to go for this. So I think it's a very small, narrow window. I mean, the bad teams aren't going to want these players.
Sure.
So it's only contenders. The other contenders probably haven't thought of it, and maybe now they start thinking about it.
All right, so Howie
the buyout bug, and that's why I bring
smarter than everybody else in the world.
Well, he typically is. The buyout, not in the world. The buyout market, what didn't exist in the NBA until it did. Now it's an accepted part of that that sport. It never existed, and all of a sudden it popped up, and now everybody does it. I mean, I could be completely wrong. I was trying to come up with an analogy, but again, Ndamukong Suh can play. I know he can play. I saw he could play at the end of last season. Up front, impersonal. I was there. He was a pain in the you know what in that game. So I see teams playing this league every week. I see the Eagles, who are the best team in the NFL. There's some pretty crappy defensive tackles they were trotting out there as reserves, even though they think they're, blah blah blah. But I mean, so he's not playing. Why is he not playing? Because he can't get the contract he wants. Why can't he get the contract he wants? Because he's 35. It's not a meritocracy. He's old and they don't want to pay him.
Understood about the NFL's overall take on veteran players and what their worth is and the like, and you just don't have a meeting of mind, and a guy can sit out. The thing that just surprises me is the Eagles made the same move for the same. Well, it is and it isn't the same position. Defensive tackle, tackle, but nose tackle is different from what Ndamukong Suh plays, so it's not really the same position. But you have to like the fact that they are signifying, hey, we're going to all costs. We're pulling out all the stops. But it does not bode well for either Marlon and or Milton Williams. They can talk the talk all that they want, but after Jordan Davis goes down and 2 weeks of watching what the guys were asked to do, and in some places, in some situation, probably asked to do things that aren't their strengths. But that's what if you're a young guy in the league still playing on your first contract, that's what you got to do. You got to show flexibility. You got to show the ability to do different things. The fact that the Eagles made these two signings these last couple of days does not bode well for either of those young DTs on the Eagles.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, like I said, the injury complicates things with Marlon Tuipulotu, but because I don't know the significance of it. But, if you look at Pro Football Focus, he's not graded out well from a film standpoint. I think he's 91 of maybe 113, 114, somewhere in that range. And Milton hasn't been effective as well. Yeah, I think Milton had a knee injury early, and I think that affected him. He played through it, but I think it tells you a lot. I'm with you, Jody. And I thought they would give Milton a longer rope. I thought they would. I thought he's got upside. I thought he started playing a little bit better. I thought they'd give him a longer rope, but maybe they're like, you know what? We still have him under contract. We got to go try win a Super Bowl. We got to go in a different direction. We'll restart the process next year, I guess is the thought.
I'll make a prediction for you right now. And Marlon played right up until the end of the game the other night against the Commanders. And then we find out afterwards he's got an injury, not only an injury that is significant enough that they can put him on injured reserve, which means he's missing a minimum of 4 games. Oh, I'll predict right now, Marlon's missing the rest of the season.
Yeah, I agree with you.
You will not see Marlon in a game for the Philadelphia Eagles again this year, because even if he recovers from the injury he has for roster purposes, he's not going to see the field again because of the 2 signings that they just made with Joseph and with Ndamukong Suh. Yeah, Marlon, take your time rehabbing, big guy, because you're not going to be back in Eagle Green. All right, J-Mac, before we punch up our first guest, and John Barchard from the podcast Bell and the Bird going to join us coming up in just a couple. Indianapolis come Sunday. We're very focused on the Eagles and their roster and the moves that they're making and how committed they are to winning a championship. Oh, by the way, they're going to have to stop Jonathan Taylor running the football this week. Watched Derrick Henry last night on Thursday Night Football, who's only 2 weeks away, kind of run through the Green Bay Packers last night. Taylor, the leading rusher in the National Football League. How are the 2 new signings going to improve what has been an area of weakness for the Birds the last 3 weeks and stopping the run this week against the Colts in Indy?
I think you can stop the run if you want to stop the run. So I think I've been talking about this a lot. I think the whole thought process of the Eagles is get players in so they can play their light boxes. It's, you're giving up something to do something, and they need better players that can hold up when they're playing their light boxes, because they want to play the zone coverage on the back end. They want to limit the explosive plays. That's the whole thought process. Howie's on board with it. Howie approved it. Evidently thinks they need guys who can hold up better. And we'll see if Linval Joseph can do it. We'll see if Ndamukong Suh can do it. They'll be in the mix. I think Joseph more quickly than Suh. But I think they've clearly identified they're not changing their philosophy of trying to play as many light boxes as possible to limit as many explosive plays in the passing game. Jonathan Gannon said it again on Thursday. The quickest way to get beat in this league is the ball going over your head. He has said it, I think, 157 times since he's gotten here. Maybe someday people will listen to what he's saying, but that's their belief. Now, if you want to argue their belief system is wrong, I think that's a more valid argument. I can have that argument, but they're not going to change that belief system, and they're not going to mix it. And that's why they're bringing in players that they think can better handle what they need them to do up front.
I don't think you even have to have the debate. Just judge the results. The results this past week, not good. The Washington Redskins were able to move the football down the field, hold on to the ball, control the clock, keep the Eagle defense on the field, and win the football game. So the results are the only thing that matters. The previous 8 weeks, even though a couple of weeks, including the week before against Dameon Pierce, making a rookie running back look like Jim Brown, they won the game. So you can complain about the fact that the Texans ran it as well as they did. The Eagles will be okay with that. They look at the stat sheet and then go to the top and circle Eagles with more points. Yeah, that's kind of the most important stat. And if you can get away with it, if you can play a defense and say, hey, we're just not giving up big plays. You want to beat us, you're going to have to take your time in beating us. That's okay, as long as you win the game. You got to be on the long end of the score at the end of the game. This past week against the Commanders, they didn't. So if they're going to stick to their guns, the philosophy is the most important thing, okay, fine. Then you just judge the results. You judge the wins and the losses. It's that simple. They won 8 and only lost 1, but the one kind of feels a little bit more because you remember the most recent result, and that's a loss against the Commanders. We'll see what if the Colts can do what the Commanders did, which is control the game, control the clock, be able to put points up and keep the Eagles in chase mode throughout the game, then yeah, there are going to be more questions for Jonathan Gannon this week. But if they win the game, I don't care about how many yards they give up.
Well, the irony is they were better stopping the run against Washington than Houston. So, I do think people are like, I think the biggest issue Washington, now having rewatched the game, having thought about it, I think the biggest issue was third downs on defense. I think that the ineffectiveness of the offense contributed. If you give up 3.1 yards per carry and the longest run you give up is 11 yards, that's what you're supposed to do in the NFL. That's what you're supposed to do. But I think this narrative, because of the time of possession, has kind of spread like wildfire. But I mean, that had to do with bad third down play, bad play on the back seven, bad communication, because they'd run for 3, then they'd convert on third down. They couldn't get off the field. And then the offense couldn't stay on the field, exacerbating it more and more and more. And all of a sudden you have 83 plays on defense. And that's what, one of the things I said about Howie is did he overreact to one bad game? And the Eagles insisted it was in the works before that. So they insisted they didn't overreact to one bad game. But, I don't know if that's true or not. Take it for what you will.
Well, we know that they've got a couple of new DTs, and will they be effective right here in week number 1? We're going to have to wait for Sunday to find that out. He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. Birds 365. J-Mac's going to get out now in number 2, going to get over, and Coach Sirianni, he'll probably have some things to say about the newest Eagles, and maybe, just maybe, yeah, no, I doubt it, give us a clue as to how much they're going to be able to contribute in game number 1. Oh, no, the coach likes his competitive advantage too much. So John will be heading over. Anyway, Barrett Brooks going to join me in hour number 2. Scheduled to join us next is John Barchard, old running mate of mine from WIP, co-host of the Bell and the Bird podcast. He's scheduled to join us next here on Birds 365.